James Cooper's day starts like any other on his struggling dairy farm. The morning sun hasn't even risen when he heads to the barn for the first milking. He's done this 1,000 times before, finding peace in the simple routine of farm life. But today is different. A woman in expensive clothes and city shoes stands at his gate, asking to learn about farming. Catherine Wells seems lost, out of place, yet something about her draws him in. As James teaches her to milk a cow, he notices her gentle touch, her eager questions, her genuine smile. What he doesn't know is that she's a billionaire CEO, tired of fake people and empty promises. In his weathered barn, surrounded by hay and the soft sounds of cattle, they're both about to learn that life's greatest treasures can't be bought. Will James still want anything to do with Catherine once he discovers who she really is? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The leather-bound ledger sat where it always did, its spine cracked and worn smooth from decades of daily use. James ran his fingers over his grandfather's careful handwriting on the first page. Cooper Family Farm, Esther, 1932. Below it, 3. Generations of morning milk yields were recorded in different hands. His grandfather's precise script, his father's bold strokes, and now his own entries, each telling the story of their family's legacy in gallons and cents. Dawn was still an hour away, but James had never needed an alarm clock. The rhythm of farm life was etched into his bones just as surely as the calluses on his hands. He pulled on his work boots, worn but well-maintained like everything else. On the farm, through the kitchen window, the barn's familiar silhouette stood dark against the pre-morning sky. The letter from First National Bank lay unopened on the counter, its official letterhead visible through the thin envelope. Third notice. He didn't need to open it to know what it said. The same story playing out across small farms all over the county, rising costs, falling prices, and banks that had forgotten what patience meant. James grabbed his jacket and stepped out into the crisp morning air. Dew dampened his boots as he crossed the yard, the grass still holding onto the nights.
Chill.
Inside the barn, 38 Holstein Friesians waited, their breath visible in the cool air. The familiar smell of hay and cattle wrapped around him like an old friend. "Morning, ladies," he murmured, flipping on the lights. Bessie, his oldest, cow, lowed a greeting. He'd bottle-fed her as a calf when her mother died, and now she was his best producer. James pulled out the ledger and noted yesterday's numbers. The yields were down again, not dramatically, but enough. Everything was always just enough to keep going, never enough to get ahead. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory. "A farmer's wealth isn't in his wallet, son. It's in his soil, his animals, and his willingness to wake up every morning and do what needs doing." James had been 12 when his grandfather passed, but those words still guided him every dawn. The milking equipment hummed to life, its rhythm as familiar as his own heartbeat. One by one he checked each cow, his hands gentle despite their strength. Every animal had its own personality, its own little quirks. Lucy, second stall on the left, always needed a scratch behind her ears before she'd settle. Martha, 3 down, had to be milked last, or she'd get anxious. As he worked, James's mind wandered to the stack of bills in his office. The equipment was aging, repairs eating into what little profit margin remained. The big corporations were buying up family farms all around them, turning centuries of tradition into anonymous industrial operations. His father had died, believing the Cooper farm would stay in the family for another generation. Some days, that belief felt heavier than all the farm work combined. But here, in the quiet of early morning, with the soft sounds of contentment from his herd and the first hints of sunrise peeking through the barn slats, James found his peace. This was what he was meant to do. Every number in that old ledger, every early morning, every careful decision about feed and breeding and maintenance, it all added up to something more than just business. It was a way of life that was vanishing faster than morning dew in July. He finished the morning milking just as the sun cleared the eastern tree line. The numbers went into the ledger, another day's record in a book that held his family's history. In its pages, James allowed himself a moment to simply stand in the doorway of his barn, watching the light change across his fields. Whatever challenges the day might bring, this moment, this was his reward. The growl of an expensive engine shattered the morning quiet. James looked up from where he was repairing a fence post to see a sleek black Tesla pulling up to his gate. The car looked as out of place as a peacock in a chicken coop, its spotless finish reflecting the morning sun like a mirror. The woman who stepped out wasn't what he expected either. Her cream-colored blazer probably cost more than his monthly feed bill, and her shoes. James almost winced watching those delicate heels sink into the soft earth. She stood there for a moment, looking uncertain in a way that suggested she wasn't used to uncertainty at all. "Excuse me?" Her voice carried across the yard, cultured and city-precise. "I'm looking for someone who might be willing to teach me about farming?" James straightened slowly, hammer still in hand. "Ma'am, there are agricultural programs at the community college in—" "No, I mean—" She took a few careful steps forward, grimacing as her heel sank deeper. "I need to learn firsthand, the real experience. Someone suggested your farm specifically." He couldn't imagine who would have sent her here. The Cooper farm wasn't exactly a tourist attraction. "This is a working dairy farm, not a petting zoo. We don't really do tours." Something flickered across her face. Determination, maybe, or frustration. She reached down and, to his surprise, slipped off her expensive shoes, holding them in one hand as she walked barefoot through the grass toward him. "I'm Catherine Wells," she said, extending her free hand, "and I'm not looking for a tour. I want to learn everything, milking, feeding, whatever it takes. I'll pay for your time, of course." Up close, she was younger than he'd first thought, probably in her mid-30s. There was something almost familiar about her face, though he couldn't place it. Her hand, when he finally shook it, was soft, but her grip was firm. "James Cooper," he said. "Mind telling me why a woman in $1,000 shoes wants to learn dairy farming?" 5,000, actually. She glanced down at the ruined heels with a surprisingly practical shrug. "And let's just say I need a change of perspective." A gust of wind carried the sweet smell of fresh-cut hay across the yard. Catherine closed her eyes for a moment, breathing it in like expensive perfume. When she opened them again, James saw something there that made him pause. A kind of hunger, not for food, but for something else. Something real. "Look, Ms. Wells. Catherine, please. Catherine. This isn't a hobby farm. The days start at 4 a.m., the work is hard, and there's no glamour in any of it." She laughed, and the sound was surprisingly genuine. "Glamour is exactly what I'm trying to get away from." She glanced around the farm, taking in the weathered barn, the grazing cattle, the endless tasks waiting to be done. "I know this must seem strange, but I need to understand this life, this work. I'll do whatever you tell me, won't complain, won't get in the way. I need to learn." James studied her for a long moment. Behind the expensive clothes and perfect makeup, there was something almost desperate in her eyes. He'd seen that look before, in his own reflection the day after his father's funeral, when the weight of the farm's future had settled fully onto his shoulders. "First thing tomorrow morning," he said finally. 4 a.m. sharp. Wear clothes you don't mind getting dirty, and shoes you don't mind ruining." The smile that broke across her face was like sunrise, warm and real and full of promise. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card, handing it to him with practiced ease. "Thank you, Mr. Cooper. You won't regret this." As he watched her pick her way carefully back to her car, designer shoes dangling from one hand, James couldn't shake the feeling that his carefully ordered world was about to change. The business card in his hand was thick, expensive stock, but surprisingly simple. Catherine Wells and a phone number. No title, no company name, no elaborate logo. He tucked the card into his pocket and turned back to his fence post. Tomorrow would come early enough, and there was still work to be done today. But as he drove the next nail home, he found himself wondering what kind of woman walks barefoot across a stranger's farm, leaving $5,000 shoes in the mud just to learn about milking cows. At 3:55 a.m., Catherine's Tesla pulled up to the farm. James had to give her credit. She'd taken his words about timing seriously. She emerged wearing jeans that probably cost more than his best cow, but at least she had on sensible boots this time. "Good morning," she called softly, clearly mindful of the early hour. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, face clean of makeup. She looked younger, more approachable without the corporate polish. James nodded toward the barn. "Ready to meet the ladies?" Inside, he pulled out his grandfather's old milking stool, 3 solid legs of oak, worn smooth by generations of coopers. His father had taught him on this same stool, and his grandfather before that. "First rule," he said, setting the stool beside Bessie. "Cows can sense nerves. They're gentle creatures, but they need gentle handling. You've got to be calm to keep them calm." Catherine approached cautiously, her designer jeans already collecting dust. "She's bigger up close. This is Bessie, best producer in the barn and sweet as honey, aren't you, girl?" He patted the cow's flank. Bessie turned her head, regarding Catherine with liquid brown eyes. "Talk to her," James suggested. "Let her get used to your voice." Catherine cleared her throat. "Hello, Bessie. I'm Catherine. I'm new at this. Now watch carefully." James demonstrated the proper technique, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. "You want to be firm but gentle. It's about finding the right rhythm." Catherine settled onto the stool, her posture perfect despite the humble seat. James found himself noticing things he shouldn't. The graceful line of her neck, the way she bit her lower lip in concentration, the subtle floral scent that somehow hadn't been completely overwhelmed by the barn's earthier smells. Like this. Her first attempts were clumsy, but she didn't give up. There was something endearing about watching someone who probably ran million-dollar meetings struggling with such a basic task. Relax your grip a little. Think of it like playing piano. Keys. She glanced up at him, surprised. "You play piano? My mother taught lessons. The old piano's still in the house, though it's been years since anyone played it." "My mother insisted on lessons too," Catherine said, adjusting her technique. "Though I was always more interested in—" Her phone buzzed in her back pocket, and she stiffened slightly. "You can take it," James said. "Bessie won't mind." "No." Catherine's voice was firm. "It can wait." But James noticed how her jaw tightened, how her shoulders carried a new tension. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, Catherine's technique slowly improving. The morning light began to filter through the barn slats, painting stripes across the straw-covered floor. "There's something peaceful about this," Catherine said finally. "Everything else just falls away." James understood exactly what she meant. It was why he'd never been able to imagine doing anything else, despite the financial pressures, despite everything. "My grandfather used to say that milk wasn't just about food. It was about connection, to the land, to the animals, to the rhythm of life itself." He sounds wise. He was. James watched her work for a moment longer. "You're doing well. Most people give up after the first few tries." "I'm not most people." There was something in her tone, not pride exactly, but a hint of steel beneath the surface. A phone buzzed again, his this time. The bank's number flashed on the screen. Like Catherine had done, he let it go to voicemail. Their eyes met in a moment of shared understanding. "Some things," he said, "can wait their turn." "Yes," she agreed softly, "they can." The morning passed faster than James expected. Catherine was a quick learner, and her questions were thoughtful. She wanted to understand not just the what, but the why of everything: feed mixtures, scheduling, the subtle signs of a cow's health. When the lesson finally ended, she stood and stretched, seemingly unbothered by her dusty clothes and messy hair. "Same time tomorrow?" James hesitated. Having her here complicated things. She was a distraction he couldn't afford, a reminder of a world that had no place in his daily routine. But there was something about her determination, her willingness to learn, that tugged at him. Same time, he agreed. Wear something older tomorrow. Those jeans probably cost more than I make. In a month. These old things? She smiled, and for a moment the morning sun caught her just right, turning her into something almost magical. See you tomorrow, James. He watched her drive away, then turned back to the old milking stool. His grandfather's initials were still visible on one leg, carved deep into the oak. What would the old man think of today's lesson? Somehow James thought he might approve. The Bell's Corner Diner hadn't changed its decor since 1975, and that's exactly how the locals liked it. James sat in his usual booth, waiting for his standard order of black coffee and wheat toast. But today, something caught his eye on the magazine rack by the counter, a glossy business publication with a familiar face on the cover. His coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. There was Catherine, looking nothing like the woman who'd spent the past week learning to milk cows in his barn. This Catherine wore a power suit and a confident smile, standing in front of a gleaming corporate headquarters. The headline read, "Catherine Wells, the Silicon Valley visionary revolutionizing modern agriculture." Ain't that something? Betty, the waitress who'd been serving him breakfast for 20 years, nodded at the magazine. Some big-shot CEO buying up farmland all over the country. Technology this, efficiency that. World's changing, Jimmy. James set his coffee down slowly. The article's first paragraph jumped out at him. With WellsTech's recent acquisition of multiple agricultural properties across the Midwest, Catherine Wells has positioned herself as a key player in the future of farming. Her company's innovative approach to modernizing traditional farming practices has drawn both praise and criticism from industry experts. His phone buzzed, a text from Catherine. "Running a few minutes late this morning. Board meeting ran long. Sorry." Board meeting. The words took on a whole new meaning now. All those mysterious phone calls, the way she dodged questions about her work, her intense interest in every aspect of farm operations. It wasn't just curiosity, it was research. The bell above the diner door chimed. "Morning, Mr. Cooper." It was Sarah, his neighbor's daughter, carrying a stack of fresh-baked muffins for the diner. "How's that city girl of yours doing with the cows? She's not my—" James stopped himself, staring at the magazine cover again. The Catherine in the photo looked like she could buy and sell his farm 10 times over without blinking. Yet just yesterday she'd spent an hour helping him fix a broken fence, her laughter genuine as she struggled with the wire cutters. "You okay, Jimmy?" Betty topped off his coffee. "You're looking at that magazine like it might bite you." "I'm fine." He pushed his half-eaten toast away. "Just remembered something I need to take care of." Outside, the morning sun was burning away, the last wisps of fog from his fields. His grandfather used to say you could tell a person's character by how they treated animals and workers who couldn't do anything for them. Catherine had shown nothing but patience and kindness to every creature on the farm, human or animal. But she'd lied. By omission, maybe, but still lied. Another text buzzed. "Almost there. Saved some of those pastries you like from my meeting. They're probably fancy enough to feed to the chickens." Despite everything, the message made him smile. Then he remembered the bank's latest letter, the one warning of foreclosure if he missed another payment. Was that her plan all along? Learn the operation from the inside, figure out its weaknesses, then swoop in with an offer when the bank finally called in its loans. The rumble of her Tesla approaching made him straighten up. She climbed out carrying a pink bakery box, her suit wrinkled from what had clearly been a long morning already. There was a smudge of mascara under one eye, and her hair was escaping its careful styling. I know, I'm late," she called out, hurrying toward him. "But wait until you taste these. They're from this amazing little French bakery that—" She stopped, seeing his expression. "James? What's wrong?" He said nothing, just held up the magazine so she could see her own face staring back at her. The pink box slipped from her fingers, expensive pastries spilling into the dirt. The scattered pastries lay forgotten in the dirt as Catherine took a step forward, then stopped, seeing James's guarded expression. "I can explain." "Can you?" James pulled the old farm map from his back pocket, the one he'd been sketching out to show her the property lines. The pencil mark seemed childishly simple now, knowing who she really was. "Were you going to wait until after I showed you every weakness in the operation?" "It's not like that." Catherine's corporate polish had vanished completely. She looked smaller somehow, more vulnerable in her rumpled suit. "Yes, I'm CEO of WellsTech. Yes, we've been acquiring farms. But this," she gestured between them, "this wasn't about that." "Then what was it about?" "I needed to understand." She moved closer, her heels sinking into the soft earth. "Everyone was telling me how to revolutionize farming, but none of them had ever set foot on real farmland. I couldn't make decisions about people's lives without knowing what those lives really meant." James unfolded the map, its creases worn from days of planning. He'd marked everything: the north pasture where the grass grew sweetest in spring, the creek bend where his father had taught him to fish, the old oak tree that had survived 3 generations of Coopers. "And what did you learn?" His voice was quiet. "That we're all just assets waiting to be optimized?" "I learned that I was wrong." Catherine's words tumbled out in a rush. "About everything. These farms aren't just businesses to be streamlined. They're living things. The way you know every cow by name, how you check the fence line even when you're exhausted, how you keep your father's old ledger, not because it's efficient but because it matters." She reached for the map, her fingers brushing his. He didn't. "You pull away." "Look at this," she said, tracing the careful lines he'd drawn. "You didn't just mark boundaries. You mapped memories, stories. When you showed me where the morning fog settles in the lower field, you weren't thinking about productivity metrics. You were sharing something beautiful." A breeze stirred the spilled pastries, carrying the scent of expensive French butter and sugar. Somewhere in the distance, a cow lowed. "Why didn't you tell me?" Catherine's hand dropped from the map. "At first, it was just easier not to. Then," she looked up at him, her eyes bright. "Then it became important that you saw me, not my title. When I'm here, I'm just Catherine, the woman who still can't milk Bessie without getting nervous. The person who's learning that sometimes the most valuable things can't be measured in dollars." James studied the map in his hands, seeing it through new eyes. He'd drawn it to teach her, but somehow it had become a record of their time together, little notes about where she'd first successfully handled the feed mixer, where she'd slipped in the mud and laughed instead of complained, where they'd watched the sunset after a long day's work. "You're buying up farms all over the country." "I was." She emphasized the past tense. "But after being here, seeing how it really works, I've been rethinking everything. That's what the board meeting was about this morning. They're not happy with me." A memory surfaced. Catherine on her phone 2 days ago, her voice carrying, "From the barn. No, we're not proceeding with the automated milking systems. Have you ever actually watched a farmer work with their herd? The relationship is essential to the process." He looked at her now, still elegant despite the mud on her, shoes still powerful despite her obvious nervousness. The woman who could buy his farm without blinking was also the woman who'd spent hours learning to quiet a nervous heifer. "I won't apologize for who I am," she said softly, "but I will apologize for not being honest about it. You deserved better than that." James folded the map carefully, running his thumb along the worn creases. "You said you wanted to learn everything about farming. Still true?" "Yes." The word carried the weight of a promise. "Then let's start over. No more secrets." He held out the map to her. "I'm James Cooper, 3rd-generation dairy farmer, currently fighting the bank to keep this place alive." A smile trembled at the corners of her mouth. "Catherine Wells, CEO of WellsTech, currently learning that some of the most valuable assets can't be listed on a balance sheet." Their hands met over. The map, and this time neither pulled away. The Canton Weekly Herald wasn't known for sensational headlines, but today's front page made up for decades of restraint. Billionaire CEO goes undercover at local farm. Romance or hostile takeover? James tossed the paper onto his kitchen table, where Catherine sat, nursing a cup of coffee. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't slept much. The morning sun through the window caught the silver threads in her otherwise perfect hair, evidence of long hours that her expensive stylists usually covered up. "Well," she said, attempting a smile, "at least they used a flattering photo. Betty at the diner told me you offered to buy the Johnston place last spring." "I did." Catherine met his eyes steadily. "Before I knew what I know now. Before I understood what these farms really mean to their communities." The newspaper's smaller headlines told other stories. Local banks report spike in farm foreclosures, and corporate agriculture, progress or predator. The entire paper read like a referendum on everything happening between them. "Martha Johnston stopped me after church yesterday," James said, sitting down across from her. "Asked if I was sleeping with the enemy." Catherine flinched. "And what did you tell her?" "Told her my grandfather taught me to judge people by their actions, not their bank accounts." He pushed the paper aside, though he probably wasn't thinking about billion-dollar bank accounts at the time. A knock at the screen door interrupted them. Howard Chen, James's closest neighbor, stood on the porch holding a basket of fresh vegetables. "Morning, James. Ms. Wells." Howard's tone was carefully neutral. "Thought you might like some tomatoes. They came in early this year." Catherine stood. "Mr. Chen, I've been meaning to thank you for the advice about rotating the cattle last week." "You were right about the north pasture." Something in Howard's expression softened. "My father learned that trick from James's grandfather back when they first started farming here together. Different times then. Banks were more interested in growing communities than profits." "Times change," Catherine said quietly, "but not always for the better. I'm learning that lesson every day here." Howard set the basket on the counter. "My daughter works in finance in Chicago. Says your company's stock dropped 15 points since you started, what did she call it? Implementing a more community-focused agricultural acquisition strategy." James looked at Catherine sharply. She hadn't mentioned that. 20 points, actually," she corrected with a small smile. "The board is not pleased with my recent philosophical adjustments." Howard picked up the newspaper, studying the front page. "You know, when the Petersons lost their farm to that big corporate outfit last year, nobody from the company ever set foot on the property, just numbers on a spreadsheet to them. That was Wells Tech," Catherine admitted, "one of our first agricultural acquisitions. I hadn't learned yet." The kitchen fell silent, except for the gentle tick of the old clock on the wall, the one that had kept time for 3 generations of Coopers. "Well," Howard said finally, "seems to me there's learning and there's doing. Question is, what do you plan to do with what you've learned?" Before Catherine could answer, James's phone rang. The bank's number flashed on the screen. This time, he couldn't ignore it. "Mr. Cooper," the banker's voice was professionally sympathetic, "we need to discuss the status of your loan. I understand you've been spending time with Catherine Wells. Perhaps we could set up a meeting to discuss options." James felt the weight of 3 generations pressing down on him. Across the table, Catherine watched him with concern, probably able to guess who was calling. "I'll come by this afternoon," he said, finally ending the call. Howard picked up his empty basket. "Times change," he echoed Catherine's words, "but people show who they really are by how they handle the change." He nodded to them both and headed. Out screen door creaking shut behind him, Catherine reached across the table, her hand finding James's. "Let me help. Not as a CEO, not as a potential buyer, just let me help." The newspaper lay between them, its headlines stark and accusatory, but James found himself looking past it to their joined hands, hers now showing calluses from farm work, his strong and sure from years of labor. Different kinds of strength coming together. "The bank wants to meet," he said. "I know." Her grip tightened slightly. "What are you going to tell them?" Through the window, he could see the morning sun illuminating his fields, the barn where his father had taught him everything that mattered, the future hanging uncertain as morning mist. The old Polaroid camera had been James's mother's, discovered in a box of memories in the attic. Catherine held it now, delighting in its vintage charm as the evening sun painted the farm in honey gold light. "These things are worth money now. You know," she said, turning it over in her hands, "urban photographers pay hundreds for them. Everything old becomes new again eventually." James finished securing the last hay bale. "Mom used to say you couldn't trust digital photos, said they were too easy to make perfect." Catherine raised the camera, framing him against the sunset. The click and whir of the mechanism seemed to capture more than just the image. It caught the warmth of the moment, the comfortable silence between them, the way the day's light softened all the hard edges of their complicated reality. "Don't!" James protested, but she was already waving the developing photo. "Too late. I want to remember this." She watched as the image slowly appeared. James in his work clothes, honest fatigue and something else in his expression as he looked at her. Behind the camera. "Want to see?" He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell hay and honest work on him. Their heads bent together over the small square of film, shoulders touching. "Mom was right," he said softly. "Digital would have made this too perfect. You can see the dust in the air, the way the light's a little too bright in the corner. It's beautiful because it's real." Catherine's voice matched his quiet tone. "Like everything here." The setting sun warmed their faces as they stood there, the photo becoming clearer between them. A strand of Catherine's hair had escaped her ponytail, brushing against James's cheek. Neither moved to break the contact. "The bank meeting," she began. "Don't." His hand found hers, rough palm against smooth fingers. "Not right now." The camera hung forgotten at her side as she turned to face him. The height difference was just enough that she had to tilt her face up slightly to meet his eyes. His free hand moved to brush that wayward strand of hair back, lingering against her cheek. "James," she whispered, and it held a world of questions. He leaned down, slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their breath mingled in the golden air. "Ms. Wells!" The sharp call shattered the moment. Catherine's assistant stood by the gate, tablet in hand, looking apologetic but insistent. "The board is waiting for the emergency conference call. They're threatening a vote of no confidence." Catherine closed her eyes, pain flickering across her face. When she opened them, James had already stepped back, his walls going up as visibly as a storm rolling across open fields. "I have to take this," she said. "I know." His voice was carefully neutral. "You're CEO of Wells Tech. It's who you are. It's not all I am." She gripped the Polaroid tighter. "Not anymore. Ms. Wells, they're asking for you to share your screen. We need to get back to where there's better signal." Her assistant was trying hard to be both urgent and apologetic. Catherine started to turn away, then spun back and pressed the photo into James's hands. "Keep this safe for me." The question carried more weight than just the picture. He nodded once, watching as she hurried toward her waiting car. Designer boots, still somehow pristine despite the farm dirt. The transformation was immediate, her spine straightening, her phone appearing in her hand, her voice taking on that crisp corporate tone as she began. "Gentlemen, I apologize for the delay." James looked down at the Polaroid. The image had fully developed now, showing a version of himself he rarely saw, a man looking at the photographer with undisguised longing. In the background, the sunset painted everything in shades of possibility. His own phone buzzed. The bank again. On the rise behind the barn, the last rays of sun caught his mother's wild roses, the ones that bloomed against all odds in soil too poor for anything else to grow. She'd always said love was like that, finding root in the most unlikely places, blooming whether you planned for it or not. He tucked the photo into his shirt pocket, right over his heart, and headed in to take the bank's call. The evening crickets were starting their chorus, singing about endings and beginnings, about moments caught in time, about chances taken and chances lost. Behind him, the roses bloomed on, paying no mind to the complications of the hearts beating below. The merger documents lay spread across Catherine's temporary office in the local motel, glossy presentations and bound reports with WellsTech's sleek logo embossed in silver. Each page detailed the aggressive rural acquisition strategy that had made her company famous. Each forecast showed profits climbing like stalks, reaching for the sun. All of it felt hollow now. She picked up the latest proposal, Automated Milking Systems Implementation Plan. 2 weeks ago, she would have celebrated these efficiency metrics. Now she could only think of James's gentle way with the herd, how he knew each cow's quirks and moods, how some things couldn't be reduced to data points. Her laptop chimed with another incoming video call. Richard Barrett, her board chairman, appeared on screen, his Manhattan office a study in chrome and glass behind him. "Catherine, this rural sabbatical of yours has gone on long enough. The Peterson merger is stalling, and our shareholders are getting nervous." She glanced at the Polaroid photo propped against her laptop, the one James had taken of her that morning, laughing as she successfully worked the feed mixer alone for the first time. "I'm learning things that will make us better, Richard, more sustainable. Sustainability doesn't pay dividends. Your job is to deliver returns, not play farmer." "What if we're wrong?" Catherine shifted through the merger documents. "Our entire strategy is based on replacing human expertise with automation, but what I'm seeing here is clouding your judgment." Richard's tone hardened. "The board is calling for an emergency session tomorrow. I've held them off as long as I can, but if you don't end this, whatever it is, they're prepared to act." Catherine's phone buzzed with a text from James. "Bank meeting moved up tomorrow morning. I need 24 hours, she told Richard, before any board action. Please, Catherine, 24 hours to prove I haven't lost my mind. That's all I'm asking." Richard studied her through the screen. They'd worked together for 12 years, built WellsTech from a startup to a Fortune 500 company. 24 hours. Then you either come back to reality or the board will bring you back. The call ended. Catherine sat back, surrounded by papers that charted her company's rise and the parallel decline of family farms across the country. Her own signature was on every strategy document, every acquisition order. A knock at her door revealed James, looking uncomfortable in the motel's fluorescent lighting. His eyes took in the papers covering every surface. "Thought you might want to see this," he said, holding out a folder. "Bank's preliminary paperwork for tomorrow." Their fingers brushed as she took it. The electricity between them hadn't diminished, despite, or perhaps because of, their interrupted moment in the sunset. "James," she gestured at the corporate documents, "I need to tell you something. About the Peterson merger, town's been talking about nothing else since the paper came out this morning." She stared at him. "How did you—" "Small town." He picked up one of the glossy presentations. WellsTech's plan to revolutionize farming across 3 states. "Guess we're just the first domino." "I'm trying to stop it," the words burst out. Of her. "The board, the automated systems, all of it. But I need time to prove there's a better way." James set the presentation down carefully. "Time's not something small farms have much of these days." "I know." Catherine ran her fingers over the bank folder. "But I also know that what you have, what I've learned here, it's worth fighting for. I just need to find a way to make the board understand that efficiency isn't everything, that some things can't be measured in quarterly reports." Their eyes met across the paper-strewn room, corporate ambitions colliding with simple truths. "The bank meeting," James said quietly. 9 a.m. tomorrow." Catherine looked at the merger documents, then at the Polaroid of her genuine smile. "I'll be there. Not as CEO of WellsTech, just as someone who finally understands what matters." He nodded once, then turned to leave. At the door he paused. "Catherine, that better way you're looking for? Sometimes it's been right there all along, waiting for the right person to see it." After he left, Catherine turned back to her laptop. She had one night to rewrite everything, her company's future, her own path, and maybe, if she got it right, the story of 100 family farms like James's. She opened a new document and began to type Proposal, Agricultural Community Partnership Initiative. Outside her window, the evening star appeared over James's distant barn, a point of light, guiding her home. The bank's conference room felt too small for the weight of what was happening. James sat straight-backed in an uncomfortable chair, the foreclosure notice stark and official on the table before him. Final notice, it declared in bold letters. The numbers below were even starker. 3 generations of family history reduced to cold calculations of debt and default. Catherine hadn't arrived yet. The bank president, Mr. Phillips, checked his Rolex again. Perhaps we should begin without Miss Wells, he suggested, though I must say her interest in these proceedings is intriguing. The door opened, but it wasn't Catherine who entered. Richard Barrett strode in, followed by 2 other Wells Tech board members in expensive suits. James felt his stomach drop. Mr. Cooper. Barrett's smile didn't reach his eyes. I believe we have something to discuss. Where's Catherine? Ms. Wells has been temporarily relieved of her duties pending a board review. Barrett placed a folder on the table. However, Wells Tech's offer stands. In fact, given the circumstances, we're prepared to be quite generous. James stared at the folder, understanding dawning like a cold winter morning. This was the plan all along. Not exactly. Barrett's smile widened fractionally. Catherine was supposed to evaluate acquisition targets personally, yes. But she wasn't supposed to, he waved his hand vaguely, become emotionally involved. The bank president leaned forward eagerly. Wells Tech's offer would clear all outstanding debts, Mr. Cooper, with a substantial premium besides. James thought of Catherine that first morning, standing uncertain in her expensive shoes. Had it all been an act? The genuine interest, the early mornings, the shared moments in the barn, was it all just corporate strategy? The conference room door burst open. Catherine stood there, slightly out of breath, her corporate polish decidedly ruffled. Her eyes found James first, then hardened as she saw Barrett. You moved the meeting up. Her voice was ice. The board felt swift action was necessary. Barrett gestured to the empty chair. Please, join us, though you're here only as an observer, of course. Catherine ignored him, moving to James's side. Don't sign anything. Please, let me explain. Explain. You what? James stood slowly. How you picked my farm, how you played your role perfectly. No! I mean, yes, initially, but Ms. Wells. Barrett's voice cracked like a whip. Need I remind you of your non-disclosure agreement? Your fiduciary duties to the company? Catherine reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thick document. She placed it deliberately on top of the foreclosure notice. My resignation. Effective immediately. The room went silent. Barrett recovered first. Don't be absurd. You've built this company from nothing. All this over some rural infatuation. No. Catherine's voice was steady now, over remembering what really matters, over learning that spreadsheets and algorithms can't measure the value of 3 generations working the same land, over realizing that I was destroying something precious. In the name of progress. She turned to James, her eyes pleading. Yes, Wells Tech sent me here to evaluate the farm, but everything that happened, everything I learned, everything I felt, that was real. More real than anything in my life before. Do this. Catherine, Barrett warned, think about what you're throwing away. She didn't look away from James. I am. James looked down at the papers before him, the foreclosure notice threatening his family's legacy, Wells Tech's offer promising financial salvation at the cost of everything that mattered, and Catherine's resignation laying bare her choice. The morning you taught me to milk Bessie, Catherine said softly, you told me that farming isn't just about production. It's about connection. To the land, to the animals, to something larger than ourselves. You were teaching me more than you knew. Barrett stood. This is ridiculous. Mr. Cooper. You have 5 minutes to accept our offer, or we'll move on to the next acquisition target. The bank seems quite eager to resolve this situation. James picked up Catherine's resignation letter, reading the words she'd written. I hereby resign my position to pursue a more authentic and sustainable vision of agricultural partnership. James, Catherine's voice was barely a whisper. I know I deceived you at first, but somewhere between that first morning and now, I found something true, something worth fighting for. The bank president cleared his throat. Mr. Cooper, the offer expires in 4 minutes. Be reasonable. James looked at Catherine, really looked at her. The woman who had arrived in $1,000 shoes now had dirt under her fingernails and calluses on her hands. Her eyes held not the calculated interest of a CEO, but something far more valuable, understanding. He reached for the Wells Tech folder, and Catherine's breath caught. James picked up the Wells Tech folder, felt its expensive weight in his hands. Then deliberately he tore it in half. The sound of ripping paper cut through the conference room's silence like a thunderclap. Barrett's face flushed dark red. The bank president sputtered. But James was watching Catherine, seeing the moment his action registered in her eyes. Well, he said quietly, that's about as clear as I can make it. Barrett recovered quickly, his corporate mask sliding back into place. Mr. Cooper, this is hardly... Get out. James's voice was calm, firm. All of you except Catherine. The foreclosure, the bank president began. We'll still be there tomorrow. James stood. Right now, I need to talk to the woman who taught. My best cow to dance. Catherine's startled laugh broke the tension. The board members exchanged glances, gathered their papers with stiff dignity, and filed out. The bank president lingered last, clearly torn between corporate protocol and local curiosity. When the door finally closed, James picked up Catherine's resignation letter. Her familiar handwriting filled the pages. Not the crisp typing of a corporate document, but something written in the early hours of morning, honest and raw. Agricultural Partnership Initiative, he read aloud. Fancy words for a simple truth. I spent all night writing it, Catherine said, trying to find the right way to say I'd rather milk cows with you than run a Fortune 500 company. Bessie will be pleased. His attempt at humor couldn't quite hide the tremor in his voice. Though she's gotten spoiled with all your attention. James. Catherine moved closer. I know I can't undo how this started, but everything since, every morning in the barn, every lesson you taught me, every moment we shared, it changed me. Changed everything. He looked down at her resignation letter again. Between the formal language of corporate departure, she'd written something else. I choose the smell of hay over designer perfume. I choose 4 a.m. milking over board meetings. I choose real over profitable. I choose this. You're walking away from everything you've built. No. She took the torn pieces of the Wells Tech folder and dropped them in the trash. I'm walking toward everything I want to build. If you'll let me. Through the conference room windows, James could see his truck in the parking lot, still muddy from morning chores. Beyond that, his fields stretched toward the horizon. The same view his grandfather had seen, his father had protected, and he had fought to keep. It won't be easy, he said. The bank's still calling the loans. The farm's still struggling. I know, Catherine's voice strengthened, but I have ideas, real ones, not corporate takeover strategies. Ways to make family farms work in today's world without losing what makes them special. Using what you know from both sides, James said slowly. Understanding dawning. Exactly. Small farm values, modern business sense. Not to destroy tradition, but to protect it. She touched his arm gently. Starting with yours, if you'll trust me one more time. The morning sun caught her just right, reminding him of that first day at the farm. But the woman before him now wasn't the polished CEO in expensive shoes. This Catherine had learned the rhythm of farm life, had earned every smudge of dirt on her hands, every crease in her resignation letter. Bessie really would miss you, he said finally. Catherine's smile bloomed slow and hopeful. Just Bessie? Well, James felt an answering smile tugging at his lips. The other cows too, and maybe, instead of answering, he pulled the Polaroid from his shirt pocket, the one of their almost kiss in the sunset, the one that had captured something real between them, something no corporate strategy could fake. "We've got morning milking in about 8 hours," he said. "Guess we should figure out what comes next." Catherine took the photo from him, her fingers lingering against his. "I already know what comes next. The hard part was choosing it. The rest we'll figure out together." Outside the bank's windows, life went on. Tractors rumbled. Down Main Street, farmers waved to each other across pickup trucks, and somewhere in the distance, a herd of Holstein Friesians waited for their morning milking. The future wasn't certain, but then again, in farming, it never was. What mattered was having the courage to plant seeds and the faith to watch them grow. The kitchen table had become their war room, covered with papers, laptops, and coffee cups. Catherine's corporate planning binder sat open next to James's handwritten farm logs, their different worlds merging on the worn wooden surface. The morning. Sun streamed through windows that needed washing, casting light on their emerging plan. "See, that's the beauty of it," Catherine said, pointing to their draft. "We're not changing how you farm. We're changing how you reach customers. Direct, farm-to-table contracts with high-end restaurants. Sustainable practices certification, educational programs for schools." James studied the numbers she'd written. They were better than anything he'd seen in years, but it seems too good to be true. "It's not magic." Catherine pulled up a spreadsheet on her laptop. "It's about telling your story. These restaurants in the city, they're desperate for authentic connections to real farms. They want to put names and faces to their suppliers. And you think people will pay extra just because they know who milked their cow? They already do." She turned her laptop to show him. "These urban farming programs charge hundreds per person for a single day of authentic farm experience. You've been giving me 2 weeks of masterclasses for free." James raised an eyebrow. "Not entirely free. You've gotten pretty good at fixing fence posts." Their eyes met across the table, shared memories of sunny afternoons working side by side, hanging between them. Catherine looked away first, but her smile lingered. "The point is," she continued, "everything that makes this farm special, its history, your knowledge, the personal touch, that's not a liability. It's your greatest asset." A knock at the screen door interrupted them. Howard Chen stood there, with his granddaughter Emma. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, not looking very sorry at all. "Emma here has a school project about farming." The little girl clutched a notebook decorated with horse stickers. "Dad says you're going to save all the farms," she announced to Catherine, like a superhero, but with cows. Catherine blinked, caught off guard. James couldn't help chuckling at her expression. "Not exactly," Catherine said, "but maybe. Emma, would you like to help us with something? We're thinking about teaching other kids about farming." Emma's eyes lit up. "Can I milk a cow? Dad says I'm too little, but I've been practicing on my stuffed animals." James and Catherine exchanged looks. There it was, the kernel of something, bigger than both of them. "You know," James said slowly, "when I was your age, my grandfather taught me on a special training cow. The gentlest one in the barn. Bessie." Catherine smiled. "She'd be perfect." They spent the next hour showing Emma the basics. Her delight at each small success, her careful attention to James's instructions, her proud grin when she got it right. It was like seeing the farm through new eyes. Howard watched from the barn door. "You two might be onto something here," he said finally. "Emma's been playing on her iPad all summer. Never seen her this excited about learning." Back at the kitchen table, Catherine added notes to their business plan with renewed energy. "We'll need to renovate the old hay barn for classes. Maybe add some safety features, viewing areas for parents." "Insurance," James pointed out. "Liability waivers." "Yes, but also marketing materials, website development, social media strategy." "Slow down," James laughed. "Let's not turn my farm into a corporate retreat center." Catherine paused in her typing. No, of course not. That's not... I'm pushing too hard, aren't I? James reached across the table and closed her laptop gently. You're doing what you do best, seeing possibilities. Just like I do what I do best, keeping things real and rooted. Balance, she said softly. That's what we both needed all along. They looked together at their emerging business plan. It wasn't just a financial document anymore. It was a bridge between their worlds, a way to preserve something precious while helping it grow. Emma's father, James said thoughtfully, he works in agricultural policy at the state level, doesn't he? Catherine nodded, catching his drift. And he'd love to support innovative farm education programs, especially ones that keep local farms viable, while providing hands-on learning opportunities. They were finishing each other's thoughts now, the plan expanding organically like well-tended crops. Outside, Emma's excited voice carried from the barn where Howard was showing her the new calves. The future they were building already had its first student. The headline spread across James's tablet like wildfire. Tech CEO trades boardroom for barn, a modern romance saving American farms. The article had gone viral overnight, complete with someone's shaky phone footage of Catherine in her work. Boots, teaching Emma how to milk Bessie. Well, Catherine said, reading over his shoulder, at least they got your good side. They sat in the barn's quiet morning shadows, taking refuge from the reporters gathering at the farm's gate. The cows seemed unbothered by the commotion, but James couldn't shake his unease. Sources close to Wells Tech suggest Ms. Wells' dramatic career change may be motivated by more than professional interest, he read aloud. The former CEO appears to have found something or someone worth more than her estimated $4.2 billion net worth. Catherine winced. I'm sorry. I should have known this would happen. Billion? James looked at her. With a B. Does it matter? He thought about it, watching her nervous expression. She had hay in her hair and dirt on her cheek, looking nothing like someone worth billions. Guess not. Though it explains those shoes you ruined that first day. Her relief was palpable. Outside, cameras flashed and reporters called questions through the gate. The morning's peace felt very far away. Mr. Cooper! They could hear the reporters clearly now. How does it feel to be dating one of America's wealthiest women? Ms. Wells, was this a planned corporate strategy? Is this a real romance or a publicity stunt? James's phone buzzed. Howard sending a warning. Channel 7 news van just pulled up. Better brace yourselves. Catherine's own phone hadn't stopped ringing since the story broke. The screen lit up again. Richard Barrett. She declined the call with a firm swipe. You know what the worst part is? She gestured at the article. They're missing the real story. This isn't about romance or corporate drama. It's about finding a way to save family farms, about bridging two worlds that need each other. Isn't it about romance a little bit? James asked quietly. Their eyes met in the barn's dimness. Before Catherine could answer, Emma's voice carried from outside. Leave them alone. They're helping kids learn about farms and stuff. They moved to the barn door. Emma stood facing down the reporters, her small hands on her hips. Howard tried to pull her back, but she wasn't finished. Ms. Catherine taught me to milk a cow, and Mr. James says I'm a natural. And my whole class wants to come learn too, but we can't if you scare all the cows with your cameras. The reporters fell silent, cameras turning toward this unexpected spokesperson. Emma didn't flinch. Did you know cows get scared if you're scared? Miss Catherine taught me that. You have to be calm and gentle, like when you're making friends. Catherine squeezed James's hand. Out of the mouths of babes. A young reporter stepped forward. You're taking farming classes here? Not yet, Emma said. But we're gonna. Miss Catherine and Mr. James are making a whole program. Dad says it's gonna help save lots of farms. The story shifted before their eyes. Cameras turned toward Emma. Questions changed focus, and suddenly the narrative wasn't about a billionaire's romance. It was about innovation in agricultural education, about connecting urban kids with farming traditions. Should we help her? Out, James asked softly. Catherine watched Emma fielding questions with all the confidence of youth. I think she's doing fine on her own. Sometimes the best thing we can do is let the truth speak for itself. From their phones, alerts kept coming as the story evolved. Innovation in agricultural education, former tech CEO pioneers farm school partnership. Bridging the urban-rural divide, a new model for sustainable farming. Local farm becomes educational hub, a template for agricultural preservation. You know, James said, this might actually help us. The publicity, I mean. Especially since Emma's doing all the hard work. Catherine smiled as the little girl demonstrated proper milking technique to an attentive audience. Though we should probably rescue her before she offers everyone a free lesson. Or before Bessie gets stage fright. They stepped out of the barn together, facing the cameras with the same steady calm they'd learned to use with nervous heifers. The reporters' questions came rapid fire, but now they were different. Can you tell us about the educational program? How many farms could benefit from this model? What role will technology play in preserving agricultural traditions? James felt Catherine straighten beside him, her CEO confidence blending seamlessly with her new farmer's wisdom. She took his hand, and together they began to tell their real story, not about billions or romance, but about finding authentic value in unexpected places, about preserving tradition through innovation, about two different worlds coming together to create something new. 2 pieces of paper lay on Catherine's motel room desk, a first-class ticket to Manhattan for an emergency board meeting, and a printed admission ticket to next week's county farm auction. The choice they represented couldn't have been clearer. If someone had written it out in neon, her phone lit up with another message from Richard Barrett. Final chance, Catherine. Come to the meeting, support the Peterson merger, and we'll forget this rural experiment. Your legacy is in the boardroom, not the barn. A knock at her door revealed James, his expression grave. Bank called. They're selling 3 more farms. At the auction, the Hendersons, the Patels, and... He hesitated. And yours. Catherine's voice was barely a whisper. He nodded. Unless we can show them a miracle in the next 7 days. Catherine looked back at the tickets on her desk. The Manhattan flight would leave in 3 hours. The farm auction was next Tuesday at 10. We don't need a miracle, she said slowly. We need proof of concept. What? She was already reaching for her laptop. Call Howard. Ask if Emma's class can come tomorrow instead of next month. Then call every parent you know with kids between 8 and 12. Catherine, the media attention is perfect timing. We'll invite them back, but this time we control the story. We show them real results, not just plans. James watched her fingers flying over the keyboard. You're supposed to be on a plane. To New York. No. She met his eyes. I'm supposed to be right here doing what matters. Her phone buzzed again. Richard's name flashed on the screen, but this time there was a different message. The board has voted. Come to the meeting or face immediate removal as CEO. Catherine picked up the first-class ticket, running her fingers over the embossed Wells Tech logo. 12 years of her life, billions in corporate value, power and influence, and everything she'd thought she wanted, all contained in this small rectangle of paper. Then she looked at the auction ticket. Simple black text on white paper, but it represented something far more valuable, the chance to save not just James's farm, but a way of life worth preserving. You know, James said quietly, no one would blame you for going back. It's your company, your life's work. That's just it. Catherine stood, decision crystallizing. Wells Tech was what I built. But this, she gestured out the window toward his farm. This is what I want to build next. She turned back to her laptop, pulling up spreadsheets and presentation slides. If we can demonstrate successful proof of concept with tomorrow's class, show concrete interest from parents, maybe even get some preliminary contracts with those restaurants you mentioned, 24 hours isn't much time. Good thing you taught me about early mornings, she smiled, then turned serious. James, I need to know, are you sure about this? About working together? About changing how things have always been done? He stepped closer, picking up the Manhattan ticket. You know what my grandfather used to say about farming? The land doesn't care how we've always done things. It cares about how we're doing things now. Catherine's phone lit up one final time. The board's official notice of her removal as CEO, effective immediately. She read it calmly, then set the phone aside. Well, she said, that simplifies things. I'm sorry. Don't be. She picked up the auction ticket. Some things are worth more than a corner office. James studied her face. You really mean that, don't you? Ask me again at 4 a.m. when we're setting up for 20 kids to learn milk production basics. His laugh was warm, relieving the tension. You know Bessie hates changes to her schedule. Then we better get started. Catherine reached for her coat. We've got lesson plans to write, parents to call, and a very patient cow to prepare for her teaching debut. She took one last look at the Manhattan ticket, then deliberately dropped it in the trash. The auction ticket went into her pocket, right next to her heart. Coming, she asked James, who still stood watching her with a mix of amazement and something deeper. Where to first? The farm supply store. If we're going to have 20 kids tomorrow, we need 20 kid-sized work boots, and maybe some spare overalls. As they headed out, Catherine glanced back at the discarded ticket. The old Catherine would have taken that flight, would have fought to keep her corporate power. But the old Catherine had never known the peace of a morning barn, the satisfaction of honest work, or the way James's eyes crinkled when he smiled. The bank might be counting down 7 days, but Catherine was counting up to something new, something real, something worth every billion she'd left behind. Dawn painted the farm in shades of possibility. 20 pairs of small rubber boots lined the barn entrance, and excited whispers filled the usually quiet morning air. Catherine stood beside James, watching Emma lead her classmates through their safety orientation with all the authority of a seasoned farmhand. Remember, Emma announced, cows are like new friends. Be gentle, be patient, and always listen to Ms. Catherine and Mr. James. On the far side of the fence, parents clutched, coffee cups and smartphones documenting every moment. Among them stood Mr. Phillips from the bank, trying to look inconspicuous and failing. Ready? James asked softly. Catherine smoothed her now-worn jeans. No designer labels in sight. As long as Bessie is. The old cow had been specially groomed. For her new role as teacher, her gentle disposition perfect for small, uncertain hands. As the first group of children approached, she turned her head curiously, seeming to understand the importance of the moment. Now, Catherine addressed the wide-eyed students, who wants to learn the most important job on a dairy farm? 20 hands shot up. Behind them, phones kept recording, social media spreading their story in real time. The morning unfolded like a well-choreographed dance. James led half the children through feed mixing and barn safety, while Catherine handled the milking lessons. Every small success was met with cheers, every hesitant attempt encouraged with patient guidance. During a brief break, Howard appeared with a stack of papers in hand. You might want to see this. It was a partnership agreement, professionally drafted, but with significant modifications in Howard's careful handwriting. My daughter helped with the legal framework, he explained. It's a new model, part educational facility, part working. Farm, part community trust. Catherine scanned the document, her business mind engaging. This structure, it could work for other farms too. That's the idea. Howard nodded toward the children, now eagerly helping with hay distribution. What you're doing here? It's not just about saving one farm, it's about building a bridge between worlds. James studied the agreement. A community agricultural trust, with educational programs providing sustainable income. And protection from corporate acquisition, Catherine added, understanding dawning. The legal structure prevents any single entity from gaining controlling interest, while allowing for modern business practices and technological innovation, Howard finished. The best of both worlds. Before they could discuss further, Emma's voice rang out, "Mr. James! Jenny got milk on the first try!" They turned to see a small girl beaming with pride as a thin stream of milk hit the bucket. Around her, classmates cheered while parents filmed the triumph. Mr. Phillips chose that moment to approach, his banker's facade cracking slightly. "Ms. Wells, Mr. Cooper, this is most irregular." Dawn painted the farm in shades of possibility. 20 pairs of small rubber boots lined the barn entrance, and excited whispers filled the usually quiet morning air. Catherine stood beside James, watching Emma lead her classmates through their safety orientation with all the authority of a seasoned farm hand. "Remember," Emma announced, "cows are like new friends. Be gentle, be patient, and always listen to Ms. Catherine and Mr. James." On the far side of the fence, parents clutched, coffee cups and smartphones, documenting every moment. Among them stood Mr. Phillips from the bank, trying to look inconspicuous and failing. "Ready?" James asked softly. Catherine smoothed her now-worn jeans, no designer labels in sight. "As long as Bessie is." The old cow had been specially groomed for her new role as teacher, her gentle disposition perfect for small, uncertain hands. As the first group of children approached, she turned her head curiously, seeming to understand the importance of the moment. "Now," Catherine addressed the wide-eyed students, "who wants to learn the most important job on a dairy farm?" 20 hands shot up. Behind them, phones kept recording, social media spreading their story in real time. The morning unfolded like a well-choreographed dance. James led half the children through feed mixing and barn safety, while Catherine handled the milking lessons. Every small success was met with cheers, every hesitant attempt encouraged with patient guidance. During a brief break, Howard appeared with a stack of papers in hand. "You might want to see this." It was a partnership agreement, professionally drafted, but with significant modifications in Howard's careful handwriting. "My daughter helped with the legal framework," he explained. "It's a new model, part educational facility, part working farm, part community trust." Catherine scanned the document, her business mind engaging. "This structure, it could work for other farms too." "That's the idea." Howard nodded toward the children, now eagerly helping with hay distribution. "What you're doing here? It's not just about saving one farm, it's about building a bridge between worlds." James studied the agreement. A community agricultural trust, with educational programs providing sustainable income and protection from corporate acquisition, Catherine added, understanding dawning. The legal structure prevents any single entity from gaining controlling interest, while allowing for modern business practices and technological innovation, Howard finished. The best of both worlds. Before they could discuss further, Emma's voice rang out, "Mr. James, Jenny got milk on the first try." They turned to see a small girl beaming with pride as a thin stream of milk hit the bucket. Around her, classmates cheered while parents filmed the triumph. Mr. Phillips chose that moment to approach, his banker's facade cracking slightly. "Ms. Wells, Mr. Cooper, this is most irregular." The new sign arrived on a Tuesday morning. "Cooper and Wells Family Farm, where tradition meets tomorrow." James watched as Catherine traced the letters with her fingers, morning dew still clinging to the freshly painted wood. "Wells is temporary," she said quietly. "Unless..." Before she could finish, a convoy of vehicles turned into the drive. The bank's board of directors had come for their final inspection, accompanied by state agricultural officials and, surprisingly, Richard Barrett himself. "Quite a crowd for a farm tour," James murmured. Catherine straightened, adjusting her work boots. "Good thing we've had some practice." The transformation of the farm over the past week was remarkable. The old hay barn had been converted into a learning center complete with viewing areas and educational displays. Local artisans had helped create child-sized farming tools, and Howard's daughter had finished the legal paperwork for their new agricultural trust model. Ms. Wells, Richard Barrett approached first, looking distinctly uncomfortable in his Italian leather shoes. I must admit, when the board sent me to evaluate this situation, I expected something quite different. The children's group is in the north pasture, Catherine replied smoothly. They're learning about sustainable grazing practices. The restaurant buyers are in the dairy barn, discussing our farm-to-table program. Feel free to observe both. James watched with quiet pride as she handled the visitors with the same gentle confidence she now used with nervous heifers. She led them through the property, not as a CEO giving a presentation, but as a farmer sharing her home. In the learning center, Emma was teaching other children how to measure feed portions. It's like cooking, she explained to her rapt audience, except you're cooking for cows, and they're very particular about their recipes. The bank directors exchanged glances as they watched urban parents eagerly signing up for future sessions. The waiting list already stretched 3 months out. Your proposal, Mr. Phillips said carefully, about expanding this model to other struggling farms in the region, is already generating interest, Catherine finished. 5 family farms have applied to join the trust. Each brings unique educational opportunities, from apple orchards to honey production. And the profit margins? James stepped forward. Are better than corporate automation could provide, with lower initial investment and higher community benefit. Richard Barrett studied the children, learning traditional farming skills with modern technological tools. The board might be interested in a different kind of partnership, not acquisition, but investment in the educational technology platform you're developing. Any investment would have to protect farm independence, Catherine said firmly. That's non-negotiable. Of course, Richard smiled slightly. You've made that quite clear by now. As the officials moved on to inspect the dairy operation, James pulled Catherine aside. The new sign cast its shadow over them, their names intertwined in carved wood and possibility. Did you mean what you said earlier? He asked. About Wells being temporary. Catherine looked up at him, her face open and vulnerable in a way no corporate boardroom had ever seen. Depends on whether you're interested in making it permanent. Before James could respond, Emma's voice carried across the, Look, Mr. James's cows like Miss Catherine better than him now. They turned to see Bessie following Catherine's scent, nudging her pocket where she always kept treats. The bank directors laughed, their formal facades cracking. Maybe, James said softly, the cows know something I've known for a while now. Catherine's breath caught. Around them, the farm hummed with new energy, children learning, parents engaging, officials nodding in approval. But in that moment, it all faded away. The sign maker left space, James continued, for changing Wells to Cooper if you want. James Cooper, Catherine said, her voice trembling slightly. Are you asking me to marry you in front of the bank board and our best cow? Seems fitting. He took her hand, work calloused fingers intertwining. Since they're all here to see our other partnership become official. Catherine looked at their joined hands, then at the sign bearing both their names, then at the farm spreading out around them, no longer just his heritage or her project, but their shared future. Yes, she said simply, to all of it. Emma's cheer rang out first, followed by Howard's deeper laugh and gradually applause from the assembled officials. Even Richard Barrett managed a genuine smile. The new sign caught the morning light, the ampersand between their names no longer a corporate symbol, but a promise. Beside them, Bessie gave a congratulatory moo, proving that sometimes the best business decisions come from the heart. The wedding invoice lay on the kitchen table, startlingly simple for a billionaire's nuptials: local flowers, hay bale seating, catering by the town's diner. Catherine had rejected 3 different professional wedding planners who'd promised rustic elegance and countryside chic. Instead, she'd asked Betty from the diner to coordinate, knowing the older woman remembered how James's parents had celebrated their own wedding on the farm 30 years ago. "You sure about this?" James asked, finding Catherine comparing Betty's handwritten estimates to the glossy brochures her former social circle had sent. "We could do something bigger. You're used to artifice," she finished. "I'd rather have real." She held up the invoice. "Besides, Betty's making her famous apple pie. That's worth more than any fancy cake." Outside, Emma was giving tours to a new group of students. Her voice carried through the window. "And this is where Miss Catherine and Mr. James are getting married, right by the old oak tree. My mom says it's super romantic." Catherine smiled, remembering the corporate galas she used to attend. None of them had made her feel as rich as she did, watching children learn to love the land. "The trust applications are up to 12 farms now," she said, changing the subject. "The Henderson place signed on yesterday. Their apple orchard will make a perfect autumn program. And the bank approved all the initial loans for educational facility upgrades." She grinned. "Turns out teaching children about farming is more profitable than corporate automation." "Who knew?" James pulled her close, both of them watching through the window as Emma demonstrated proper cattle brushing technique. The little girl had become their unofficial spokesperson, her genuine enthusiasm worth more than any marketing campaign. "Richard, Barrett called," Catherine said softly, "offered to walk me down the aisle, said it was tradition for a mentor to do that." "What did you tell him?" "That Howard already agreed to do it. He understands what we're building here better than anyone from my old life." A commotion outside drew their attention. A sleek corporate car had pulled up, and Richard himself stepped out, looking both impressive and out of place in his business suit. "Catherine," he called, waving a folder, "the board approved the Educational Technology Partnership. Full funding, no control requirements, just like you asked." She met him at the gate, James by her side. The folder contained everything they'd hoped for: resources to expand their program across the state, technology to connect urban schools with rural farms, all while keeping agricultural heritage intact. "I have to admit," Richard said, looking around at the thriving farm, "you saw something we missed: the human element, the value of connection." "She's good at seeing what matters," James said quietly, his hand finding Catherine's. Richard smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his corporate polish. "The wedding invitation arrived. I'm honored to be included." "You helped build who I was," Catherine said, "so you should be here to see who I'm becoming." They gave him a tour, not the carefully curated version for officials, but the real daily life of the farm. He watched children learning, parents engaging, and farmers teaching with quiet pride. By the time he left, his expensive shoes were muddy, and his smile had lost its boardroom precision. That evening, as the sun set, Catherine and James sat on their porch, reviewing RSVPs. City executives would sit next to local farmers, corporate lawyers beside farmhands. Like their lives, like their vision, the wedding would bridge two worlds. "Emma wants to decorate Bessie for the ceremony," James mentioned. "Says our best cow deserves to dress up too." Catherine laughed, then grew thoughtful. "You know, a year ago, my idea of success was closing billion-dollar deals. Now it's watching children learn to milk cows and helping farms survive." "Having regrets?" She looked at their simple wedding invoice, then at the corporate partnership agreement Richard had brought, then at James himself. "Only that it took me so long to find this, to find you." A car pulled up, Howard and Emma delivering fresh eggs and wedding planning updates. The little girl bounded out, waving a drawing of Bessie in what appeared to be a flower crown. "Some people," James said, watching Emma excitedly explain her bovine fashion ideas, "might say you've stepped down in the world. From CEO to farmer's wife." Catherine squeezed his hand. "I prefer to think of it as stepping into the real world. Besides," she added with a smile, "I'm still a CEO, just of something more valuable than Wells Tech ever was." The evening settled around them, peaceful and certain. Tomorrow would bring more children to teach, more farms to help, more bridges. to build between traditions and progress. But for now, they had this moment, as real and rich as the land itself. 1 year later, the photograph sits on their mantle. Catherine and James, surrounded by their first graduating class of junior farmers, Bessie wearing her honorary teaching assistant ribbon, and Emma front and center, holding her junior farm manager certificate. It captures everything they've built together, not just a marriage or a business, but a whole new way of preserving what matters. "We have a full house today," Catherine calls from the porch, watching 3 school buses wind up their driveway. The Cooper and Wells Agricultural Education Network now includes 15 family farms, each specializing in different aspects of sustainable farming. Today's students will learn about dairy production here before visiting the Hendersons' apple orchards and the Chen's organic vegetable operation. "Emma's already in the barn," James replies, coming up behind her. "Says she needs to prepare her advanced milking demonstration." Catherine leans back against him, their rings catching the morning light. The farm has changed in subtle ways over the past year. Modern equipment alongside traditional tools, solar panels on the barn roof, tablets displaying real-time data next to his grandfather's old ledger. But its heart remains the same. The former CEO of WellsTech now spends her mornings teaching children about animal care and her afternoons helping other farmers adapt their operations for the future. Her corporate skills serve a different purpose. Now, building bridges between urban and rural communities, preserving agricultural heritage while embracing necessary change. James has found his own unexpected joy in teaching, sharing 3 generations of farming wisdom with eager young minds. The bank's foreclosure notices are a distant memory, replaced by glowing educational reviews and a waiting list that stretches 6 months out. "Mr. and Mrs. Cooper," Emma's voice carries across the yard. "The new calves are ready for their first public appearance." They walk hand in hand toward the barn, passing the sign that started it all. The ampersand between their names has tarnished slightly, weathered by seasons of sun and rain, but like their love, it's only grown stronger with time. Inside, Emma is already explaining to her father why she wants to study agricultural education in college. She's their star pupil turned junior instructor, proving that sometimes the best teachers are those who remember what it's like to learn something new. "Ready?" James asks, as the first excited voices of children reach them. Catherine squeezes his hand, thinking of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, of first milking lessons and morning dew, of all the paths that led her here, always. Together, they step forward to greet their new students, ready to share not just their knowledge, but their vision of a future where tradition and progress walk hand in hand, and the simplest lessons yield the richest rewards.